Teka Adams was bleeding on the floor when she understood that waiting would kill her. She had been held inside the Suitland apartment for days, 9 months pregnant, weak from blood loss, pain, fear, and the kind of exhaustion that makes a person drift in and out of the room around them. The woman who had lured her there was finally asleep nearby. Teka had managed to loosen her hands. She could hear ordinary sounds from beyond the walls, proof that life was still moving outside the apartment where she and her baby were being hunted. She had one chance. On the morning of December 2nd, 2009, Teka was 29 years old, homeless, pregnant, and staying at a maternity home in Washington, D.C. She had been trying to stabilize her life before her baby arrived. She had a husband, P.J. Bell, who was waiting for their child, and relatives who knew this pregnancy mattered to her. She was close enough to delivery that baby clothes, supplies, and help from a stranger could feel like relief. That was what Veronica Daramis offered. Daramis was a 40-year-old woman from Maryland. To Teka, she presented herself as someone connected to a program that helped pregnant women in need. She said she had baby items waiting for her. The offer sounded practical and kind. Donated supplies, things Teka would need soon, things that could make the last stretch of pregnancy less frightening. Teka agreed to go with her. She climbed into Daramis's car, believing they were heading to pick up baby items. Instead, Daramis drove her to an apartment in Suitland, Maryland. Once inside, the promise fell apart. Daramis fed her, kept her there, and then attacked. According to later reporting and court records, she struck Teka, overpowered her, and used duct tape to restrain and gag her. Teka was trapped. The apartment became a closed room of threats, pain, and confusion. Daramis's teenage son was also in the home at points during the ordeal, and prosecutors later said he helped restrain Teka. Daramis kept the bedroom door closed and tried to keep others from seeing what was happening. She took control of Teka's phone. Outside, PJ called again and again, and when Teka did not answer, he knew something was wrong. Inside the apartment, Teka tried to stay alive by talking. She told Daramis people would be looking for her. She said she would lose her place at the maternity home if she did not check in. She tried to reason with the woman holding her captive. She asked to be taken to a hospital. She looked for anything that might make Daramis hesitate. The longer she survived, the more time her family had to notice she was gone. But Daramis had not brought Teka there for clothes. She wanted the baby. Over the next several days, Daramis held Teka captive, while her plan became more desperate and violent. Teka was left on a futon mattress. Her body weakened. She was pregnant, restrained, wounded, and cut off from anyone who could help her. Daramis cleaned, watched her, and tried to control the scene around them. By Saturday, December 5th, the danger reached its worst point. Daramis came into the room with sharp tools and began trying to cut into Teka's abdomen to remove the baby. Teka was awake through the attack. She could feel the pain. She could not fight the way a healthy person could fight. She could only endure, speak when she could, and keep her mind fixed on surviving long enough to save herself and her child. Daramis worked for hours, stopping at times and starting again. She used towels and ice water. At one point, she played music, apparently to cover sound. Teka tried to slow her down any way she could. She convinced Daramis that the restraints were too tight, and when her hands were finally bound in front of her instead of behind her, she began quietly working to loosen them. Every small movement mattered. Teka chewed at the cloth around her wrists when Daramis was not looking. She studied the room. She waded through pain so severe that it blurred time. Daramis eventually stopped, told Teka she could finish later, and lay down to sleep. The apartment went quiet. Teka was still alive. Her baby was still inside her. She knew that if Daramis woke and continued, she might not survive another attempt. So she moved. Slowly, painfully, trying not to make noise, she freed her hands enough to act. She got herself up. She stepped over Daramis. She cupped her hands beneath her stomach to hold herself together and keep blood from dripping onto the sleeping woman and waking her. Then she headed for the door. Teka was badly wounded, weak and pregnant. She could barely walk. She had to keep one hand against the wall and the other against her body. She moved through the apartment toward the way out, knowing that one sound could bring Daramis awake behind her. She reached the door and got into the hallway. Daramis woke and tried to stop her. She came after Teka and attempted to pull her back into the apartment. For a moment, Teka was still trapped in the doorway between the place where she had been held and the hallway where help might finally hear her. Then a neighbor came out. Daramis tried to explain it away. She tried to make it seem like nothing serious was happening. Teka showed the truth of her injuries. The neighbor understood and called for help. Daramis fled. Emergency responders came to the apartment building and found a woman who should not have been alive after what she had endured. Teka was still conscious enough to speak. Doctors had to save both mother and child. Teka had deep abdominal injuries, including damage to her bladder and abdominal muscles. She needed emergency surgery. Her baby girl was delivered by C-section and survived. Teka named her Miracle Sky. The name was not decoration. It was a statement of what had happened. A mother had been lured, bound, cut, and held captive for 4 days. Her baby had been the target. Both of them came out alive. Daramis surrendered to police later that day. The case horrified investigators, doctors, and the public because it belonged to a rare crime often called fetal abduction, where an attacker targets a pregnant woman to take her unborn child. Teka had survived one of the most extreme versions of it. The recovery was slow. Teka could not simply get up and resume life after the hospital. Her abdominal muscles had been cut. She had to rebuild strength before she could walk normally or care for Miracle the way she wanted. She later described being determined to move because her daughter was waiting. The same will that got her through the apartment now pushed her through recovery. In January 2010, Teka faced Daramis in court. She brought Miracle with her. The baby who had been the center of the attack was alive in the courtroom. Daramis was charged, and the legal process continued. In November 2010, Veronica Daramis pleaded guilty to first-degree assault and also entered a plea acknowledging that prosecutors had enough evidence to convict her of false imprisonment. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In court, Daramis claimed that Teka had agreed to sell her the baby for $5,000. Teka reacted with anger, and she had to be escorted from the courtroom. The claim did not change the outcome. The court records showed Daramis had held her captive, attacked her, and tried to take the child from her body. For Teka, survival meant living with what happened without letting the attack become the only thing that defined her. She had been in a vulnerable place when Daramis found her. She needed help. She accepted an offer that sounded like support for a pregnant woman preparing for birth. That trust was used against her. But when the moment came, Teka did not give up. She loosened her hands. She waited until the room was quiet. She stood when standing should have been impossible. She held her own body together and walked toward the door because her daughter's life depended on it. The hallway became the distance between death and rescue. Teka Adams escaped with injuries so severe that responders were stunned she was alive. Her daughter survived inside her through 4 days of captivity and a violent attempt to take her. The child was born alive, healthy, and given the only name that made sense to her mother: Miracle Sky. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.